You're about to watch my conversation with the Chief Technology Officer of dcSpark, the company behind the Ethereum-compatible Cardano sidechain and the Ethereum virtual machine L2 rollup for Algorand. This project is called Milkomeda. Before becoming the CTO of dcSpark, Sebastian began his career as a software developer at Microsoft. And then he became an R&D engineering lead and then co-VP of Emergo, the official commercial and venture arm of the Cardano blockchain. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with Sebastian. I hope you enjoy our conversation. We touched on everything, including the L2 rollup for Algorand, sidechains, state proofs, and beyond. If you like the conversation, smash that thumbs up button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Now, with all that out of the way, here is my conversation with Sebastian of dcSpark and Milkomeda.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're really excited to ship and release Milkomeda as part of the Algorand family and into the Algorand ecosystem. So it's great to come on here and talk to you about all the great work we're doing.
Fantastic. I'm super excited about it. If you would just be able to just give a quick background on yourself and what dcSpark is and how you and the team decided to, or what inspired the team to create the cross-chain rollups to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. So I got involved in crypto professionally about 5 years ago. And at the time, I was mostly focused in another ecosystem called Cardano. And I was eventually leading the Cardano R&D team at another one of the companies that started the Cardano blockchain. And at the time, the CTO was Nico, who is now one of our co-founders at dcSpark. And essentially, there was some good stuff happening at that company, but we saw the continued growth of crypto. And we said there's really an opportunity to, do more as a standalone entity with our own vision of, how things should be done. And that's kind of how dcSpark got started. We started 3 people. Robert Kornacki is the third one, who was also working with us at the time. And when we started dcSpark, we really wanted to be a crypto ecosystem builder. So that means is that if you look at other companies out there, they're usually like a company for DEX or a company for an NFT marketplace. They're very, single focused company, and that's great. But we wanted to try and build a company that really considers the whole end to end of the crypto ecosystem. That means, building blockchains themselves, building tools. And as we were doing this, we're thinking, well, we can't just build user products. We have to think about what comes after user products. And we thought, stuff like off-chain and L2 really had a lot of potential in them. And so we started the Milkomeda project, which ended up, turning into its whole own thing. And dcSpark is one of the contributors to this project still. And the real idea of Milkomeda was, how do we add new capabilities to existing blockchains? And that's where it grew from there.
Awesome. And you mentioned that, and I believe I was probably pronouncing it wrong, so it's Milkomeda?
The pronunciation depends on the person, so take whatever
Okay, cool.
you want.
So awesome. So perfect. So you mentioned that you started off in Cardano, and it does seem like the first action for Milkomeda was to connect Cardano to Ethereum. Could I ask why the next step would be Algorand, the Algorand rollup? What was, there's so many blockchains, so many layer ones out there. What was it about Algorand that the team wanted to go there next?
Yeah, I think one of the core philosophies we have as a company is we want to have meaningful work done, right? We don't want to just do work that, a year from now disappears and we can say, oh, we made money and that was fine. We want to have work that really pushes the industry forward. And we see Algorand as a community that, has this kind of research mindset where whatever happens to the Algorand blockchain, the research work that the Algorand team is doing will live on for a very long time. And we thought that really aligned well with our philosophy as a company and as a team. And so that's why we thought Algorand was kind of a really good philosophical fit for our project.
Perfect. And so Milkomeda is working on an Algorand L2 rollup. Could you explain what that is for my audience, and then maybe explain some potential benefits of building such a rollup for the ecosystem?
Yeah, for sure. So what everybody has noticed these days is that it's impossible to have one layer one that just handles everything in the world, right? If you want to have a really performant layer one, you often end up having to do trade-offs on decentralization. And even if you make those trade-offs, there's no guarantee you might hit like the 5K transaction per second required for, the entire world to come on board onto your platform. And so people are thinking about, well, how can we continue with the great decentralization properties we have, but also, continue to meet all the demands of users out there. Yeah. And at the same time, people are thinking about how do we fit all the computation, how do we meet all the computation needs people have? Because people, may have applications that can run on the AVM, and that's great, but some use cases may require different execution virtual machines and different kinds of execution environments that the Algorand blockchain might not be able to deliver natively. And so there's been a lot of thought about how to tackle this problem. And one of the top solutions that you may have heard of is sidechains. So sidechains means that you basically have free reign on what you want to do. So you have full flexibility. You can switch out the virtual machine, you can switch out the consensus model, you can do whatever you want. But usually the problem with a sidechain is that you lose the security model of the base layer. And Algorand, as you know, spent a huge amount of time making a really safe layer one. And so it's kind of unfortunate that you'd have to lose the security of the layer one to get the flexibility you want. And so layer twos have been positioned as a way to get the flexibility you want while also keeping the security of the layer one, inheriting from the security from layer one. And that's why there's been so much research into layer twos, and that's essentially the kind of technology that layer two solutions like Milkomeda provide to basically add EVM support to Algorand while still maintaining the core security properties of the Algorand blockchain.
Awesome. So in some way, it's kind of like a bridge, but it's obviously tremendously different than traditional bridging mechanisms. Could you, explain a little bit more in depth on what the difference is between these L2 rollups and a traditional bridging mechanism that we see today in the ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that's kind of easy to conceptualize is if you have a sidechain. So if you have a sidechain, so if people don't know, a sidechain means basically a whole separate blockchain that is just philosophically aligned with another project. So it's not like you're reusing the code base, it's not like you're doing anything. It's two totally separate blockchains that are just philosophically aligned. And the difference with the layer 2 is that the layer 2 does not have its own blockchain. If you want to synchronize Milkomeda, you don't go download a new blockchain. You synchronize an Algorand node, and the whole data you need to compute the state of Milkomeda lives on Algorand. There's no other blockchain you have to download. You're just running Algorand plus some extra software to interpret some special logic. And so with this, it means that the things you can do in the bridging logic are also very different. One of the main problems you have with bridging for sidechains, the reason they get hacked so often is because the sidechain doesn't know what's happening in Algorand, and Algorand doesn't know what's happening in the sidechain. So it's very hard to try and be 100% sure that something really happened in the sidechain or something really happened in Algorand. And of course, there's projects like state proofs that are meant to tackle this in an efficient manner. But we're kind of in a different situation where for Milkomeda, because we're writing all our data to Algorand, because we live on Algorand, there's no separate node that you have to synchronize. You have access to the full Algorand state. When you're running a Milkomeda node, you have the Algorand node on your machine, you're computing the state from the Algorand node. And so it makes bridging a lot safer because you have access to the full state of the Algorand blockchain.
Beautiful. I appreciate that explanation. And so if my understanding is correct, so applications that are built on this L2 would contribute to Algorand's TVL and growth, right? It wouldn't be considered something separate.
Yes, that's correct. So there's two reasons that happens, just so people understand. So one of them is because we did not release our own token. We're using Algo as the base asset. So this is, you don't have to go buy a new useless token just to interact with the platform. You just keep your Algo and you interact with any DEX you want. And the other thing is that because we're reusing the Algorand security model, because we're deploying directly onto Algorand, it's all part of the same ecosystem. So there's no kind of separate chain with its own TVL. It's all adding to the Algorand TVL and adding extra functionality to the existing Algorand deployment.
Absolutely beautiful. So the Algorand rollup is currently in the testnet stages. How is that going so far? And I'm curious, what have been some of the struggles so far in deploying this technology?
Yeah, so it's been going great. So we've had our testnet release for a little while now, and we're continuously adding more features. So currently, you can wrap and unwrap algo, the main asset, obviously, and we're currently working on adding token support as well. So you can take your ASAs and bring them over to Milkomeda and then bring them back. So token support is our next big step, and we're kind of gearing towards the mainnet release. The hardest thing, of course, is that this is going to be the first deployment of Algorand that uses a layer 2. And the layer 2 technology that we're building for Algorand is kind of first of its kind. There are layer 2 solutions on other blockchains like Ethereum. So you may have heard of projects like Optimism, Arbitrum, zkSync. These are kind of well-known layer 2s at this point. But they're written in ways that basically don't allow you to add a new virtual machine in the same way that we're doing with Algorand and Milkomeda. And so we're kind of pioneering this new type of rollup. And the benefit with our strategy is that we'll be able to basically reuse existing state in the Algorand layer 1 and kind of project that up into the layer 2. And this kind of unlocks a lot of use cases that aren't possible with traditional rollups you might have seen in other blockchains. And we thought this technology was really important because the idea of Milkomeda, as I talked about before, is not to live beside a community, it's not to take from a community, it's to add to the community. And the best way we can add to the community is not only bring new functionality to the community, but also leverage and encourage people to deploy to the layer 1 and make sure that the success of Milkomeda means success of layer 1 apps.
Now, you mentioned it. Could you elaborate a little bit on some of the differences of the potential use cases that arise from using this level of roll-up technology versus the other L2s that you just mentioned?
Yeah, for sure. So I like to put everything on a spectrum of full flexibility and full security. So if you talk about sidechains, like I mentioned earlier in this video, you get full flexibility, but basically zero security, right? You have to restart the security model, have a new set of validators, everything from scratch. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have what are usually called ZK rollups. So they use zero-knowledge cryptography to power their system, and basically they take these zero-knowledge proofs, put their data onto Ethereum or, for example, Algorand, and then as long as you assume that the math is correct, you can recompute the state based off these zero-knowledge proofs. So you get the full security as long as you trust that math is correct, but you lose a huge amount of flexibility. Because everything has to be written in these proofs. And as you may know, writing these systems is extremely difficult. In fact, people have been working on ZK EVMs for years now. We still don't quite have a pure ZK EVM. Even once we have it, upgrading these systems is incredibly difficult. So it's hard to modify these systems even after you've built such a complex system. Somewhere between, we have something called optimistic rollups, and these work with something called fraud proofs. So basically what happens is that you assume the data is correct. And if ever you see incorrect data, you basically call that. You say like, hey, that person over here, did not actually calculate the result of the smart contract correctly. And this is what the result should be. And you kind of call them out on it. And the benefit of these optimistic rollups is that they're much faster and it allows you to have some flexibility. You can switch kind of the consensus model a bit and play around with some of the flexibility, but you still have one core restriction, which is that it has to be the same virtual machine. And the reason why is because to run the fraud proofs, the way it works is that you rerun the calculation inside the layer 1. And so it means you need to be able to rerun the EVM, the Solidity smart contract inside the layer 1, which is not possible in our situation, for example, with Algorand, because Algorand does not natively support EVM. So you can't do an optimistic rollup. So what we're trying to do is come up with something that's more secure than a sidechain, but more flexible than an optimistic rollup. And so that's why we're kind of in a unique position that kind of no other project in Ethereum is tackling, because all of them have access to the EVM. But this kind of extra flexibility allows us to, as I mentioned previously, kind of take more advantage of the layer 1 capabilities that exist compared to other solutions. For example, for optimistic rollup, you can't easily take advantage of Algorand layer 1 functionality because it has to be replayable in EVM smart contract, which does not natively understand Algorand capabilities. So you kind of lose this kind of functionality. And the other benefit about Milkomeda is that our solution means that in the future, for some reason, the Algorand community wants Move support, which is a new programming language that's gaining a lot of traction, then we can say, okay, we'll redeploy Milkomeda, but now with Move support, you can deploy Move smart contracts to the Algorand blockchain. So it also gives us flexibility to continue in the future to deploy more computation models to Algorand as the community sees need for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I appreciate it again for that really great in-depth explanation there. So what is the timeline for the mainnet release for the Algorand rollup?
Yeah, so as you know, timelines are always very difficult in the engineering world.
Rough timeline.
The testnet has the testnet has been going well, and we're just kind of cleaning up functionality and addressing audit results and all those kind of last steps before the finish line. And so we're hoping to have the mainnet released sometime in September. Now, obviously, the vision I pitched to you for Milkomeda in this interview is not just we'll deploy this and then it's done and we walk away from it, mission accomplished. We'll have some functionality available on day one, and we'll continue to build out Milkomeda and the Algorand ecosystem over the years to add more and more functionality to the system. So the V1 is coming out hopefully sometime in September, but obviously we'll have a lot of exciting updates over the months and years to come.
That actually leads right into my next question, which is once the mainnet hits, what's next on the roadmap that, or something next on the roadmap that you're excited about? I know you might not be able to share everything that's coming up on the roadmap, but if you could maybe share a couple things that you're excited about once you get this on mainnet for what's coming next.
Yeah, for sure. So there's two main things that I'm excited about. So one of them is that once we hit on mainnet, we're looking at probably a few hundred to maybe 1,000 or 2,000 transactions per second that our systems support. And that's thanks to the fact that the Algorand blockchain not only is extremely performant chain, but also the new update that's coming fairly soon will reduce block times and increase the amount of data you can put on the Algorand blockchain, which helps us as a project a lot. And so this kind of update is something we're really looking forward to. But once we have this deployed on layer one and we have a really performant solution, next is to move this in the hands of the community. And so obviously we'll continue to be involved in our own way, but we really want to set up a kind of Milkomeda DAO where the average person can get involved in the governance of the project and operating the project, because we don't want to be validators of the system. We want anybody to in a sense become a sequencer. And so we have a whole plan for this, and this will take some time to get implemented. That's something else that I'm really excited about. And once we have all this in place, we can then talk more about how to project the state of kind of layer one applications into layer two, which I talked about earlier in this call, and that requires a decent amount of extra engineering effort on top of layer one, and that'll be one of our main focuses after the main net release.
So Milkomeda connects Cardano with Ethereum, and it's also working to connect Algorand with Ethereum. Will there be a day where they can all talk to each other, and I can communicate from Algorand to Cardano, so to speak, or maybe the next chain that you guys integrate going forward, or what's the vision there?
Yeah, and so the key thing to notice that we're not directly linking to Ethereum, the blockchain, right? So we're leveraging Ethereum technology, EVM Solidity, so you can deploy EVM smart contracts to Algorand. But the thing is that because there's a lot of Dapps out there for bridges between EVM blockchains, basically the fact that we're adding EVM capabilities to Algorand makes it extremely easy for blockchain projects to then come in and build that bridge between Algorand and Ethereum. So we're not going to be the ones building the bridge between Algorand and Ethereum, but there's a bunch of other companies that are interested in building that bridge, and so you'll have a few options in that regard. What that means, in the same way, is that, for example, for Cardano, there is a Milkomeda deployment. Now, the Milkomeda deployment in Cardano is not a layer 2, it's a sidechain, because Cardano at the moment does not support kind of layer 2 technology, so it's not possible to have what we have on Cardano, and it'll be exclusively on Algorand probably for some time. But nevertheless, Cardano does have EVM capabilities through the sidechain. And so a company can come in and basically decide to bridge these two chains together. So you'd have a bridge between Milkomeda C1, which is the sidechain for Cardano, and Algorand's the Milkomeda Layer 2 A1 is what we call it, the Layer 2 deployment on Algorand. And somebody can definitely come in and bridge that. And we're definitely hoping that happens because in the future, we'd like to deploy to more chains and kind of grow the connection between different blockchains. I really believe that the future is multi-chain. A lot of users, they don't really care what blockchain they're interacting with. They just want some cool user experience. And so we think there's a lot of benefit in bridging communities together. And we think that because Algorand has not only high throughput, but also instant finality, will make it an extremely compelling offer for a lot of use cases. And other blockchains like Algorand Cardano don't have instant finality, which means you get some benefit from that, but also there's a lot of use cases where this is not really great for. And so you can imagine a future where some people from the Cardano ecosystem say like, well, for this specific use case, I really want instant finality, and so I can hop over to the Milkomeda A1 deployment, have my use case over there, and then come back and whatever people want to decide. And hopefully that becomes eventually semi-transparent to the user, so that they're using whatever chain works best for the use case, and we provide whatever platform they need.
Perfect. And you brought up some of the upgrades that Algorand is planning to go through sometime soon, I believe probably over the next couple of weeks or months. That includes an increase in the transaction per second, as well as state proofs, which we briefly touched on before. And I'm curious, is the team imagining any sort of way to incorporate state proofs into anything that they're doing or planning to build in the future? I know it's still a newer technology, so I feel like a lot of people are kind of unaware of what they could even do with it once it goes live. But I'm curious if you've put any thought into it.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of novel use cases that come out of this, but we don't need it for our kind of initial work, because the benefit of the state proof is that you can take the Algorand state, compress it, and basically make it available from other places. That's kind of the core idea, right? We don't really need that as much for our use case because we're deploying directly to Algorand, so we already have access to the full Algorand state. So it's not like there's some state that we need compressed and we don't really need proof of the Algorand state. We already have access to the full Algorand state as is. But I'm sure people will come up with novel ways to use this technology that will allow it to be combined with Milkomeda in ways that we don't really expect at the moment. But at least for kind of the core technology, it's not something that we need. But obviously, it's a huge and important milestone in the Algorand roadmap, and so we're looking forward to it as just kind of a cool technology that will enable a lot of cool stuff.
Absolutely, and you brought up a kind of a good point where it's sometimes technology like this or anything in the crypto space is sort of released into the wild, and then you're kind of like amazed at what comes up over the next 6 to 12 months, what people create off of it. It's like, oh, I didn't see that angle, so it's really interesting, and I'm just as excited to see the creativity that comes from it and what people decide to do with it. With all that being said, though, is there anything that we haven't discussed in this discussion that you'd like to bring attention to my audience, whether it be something you're working on personally or something at dcSpark or Milkomeda that we haven't touched on yet that you'd like to bring up?
As I mentioned, a lot of the people involved in our company really want to focus on the kind of end-to-end of crypto ecosystems. And so there's companies like Milkomeda that is working on layer 2s. A lot of people in our company are kind of involved with other blockchain efforts to really drive blockchain adoption and drive the growth of ecosystems. And Algorand's an ecosystem that we really think aligns well with our philosophy and what we want to achieve in this world. And so definitely check out our social media and all this kind of stuff, and we'll have a lot of projects coming out in the future. We really hope that we can integrate deeply with the Algorand community and bring a lot of cool stuff to the table beyond just already all the stuff that I think is really cool that we're bringing with Milkomeda.
Absolutely. I think it's sort of groundbreaking, honestly. And as you said, this is the first of its kind, at least in the Algorand ecosystem. But you mentioned it really quickly, but I want to give you a chance to plug all the social medias, let the audience know where they can go learn more, maybe even plug the Testnet website for people to go and try. And I'll also include links to all of that down in the description below when this video finally airs.
Yeah, for sure. If you go to milkomeda.com, we have some documentation you can get access to, which has an Algorand section. So that's everything you'll need to know to get started. For social media, we're primarily on Twitter, so you can follow the Milkomeda Twitter account, dcSpark Twitter account, and there's another Twitter account you might be interested in called Paima Studios that's working on some gaming stuff, blockchain gaming that leverages some of the similar technologies to Milkomeda. So if you're interested in some of the work that people on our team are doing, definitely go check out those 3 Twitter profiles as well.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing all of that with our audience. I'm super excited for the project. I can tell you're super excited for the project. There were a couple of times you were explaining it and you had a big grin on your face. So very excited for everybody in the team, and I appreciate you coming on the show and discussing it with us.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
Wow, that was a fantastic discussion, wasn't it? If you haven't done so already, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, share the video with a friend, and comment down below with your favorite part. Also, check out the description down below for ways to learn more about dcSpark, Milkomeda, and Sebastian, as well as for links that help the show, including a link to Lofty AI. Using this link, you'll get $25 towards your next real estate investment just for using my link down below. So check out that link and check out all the other links, including a link to help get the next block to Dubai for Algorand's annual Decipher conference. We want to get as many cameras and microphones into as many faces as possible and bring the Algo fam all of the content we can. On that note, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video, and we will catch you in the next one.